Now to an NBC News exclusive and the NATO ally defending Hamas. Turkish President Erdoğan addressing the UN earlier today, criticizing world leaders for not stopping the bloodshed in Gaza. After those remarks, Erdoğan sat down for an exclusive interview with our chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, who joins us now live in studio tonight here on Top Story. So, Keir, talk to us about what he told you and what you learned, because you made a bit of news in this interview.
That's right, Tom. You said it. Turkey is a NATO ally. It's an American ally, and it has had differences with the US in recent years. And now, since October 7th, another difference. Just listen to how the president of Turkey talks about the situation there. There are those who criticize you, Turkey, for providing a home for Hamas, who the US say are terrorists, and you say that you are opposed to terrorism.
Şimdi biz teröristlere karşıyız.
We are of course against terrorism and terrorists.
Hamas'ı
But
iyi tanıyan liderlerden bir
I'm
tanesi.
one of the leaders who is real familiar with Hamas, and I never called Hamas a terrorist organization.
Bir terör örgütü olarak bakmıyorum.
I don't approach Hamas as a terrorist organization now, because Hamas is spending efforts in order to protect their motherland, and they are actually a group of resistance. So I can't call such a group of resistance a terrorist organization. Let's look back in time, all the way down to 1947, and up until now, Hamas, or Palestine, let's say, have been losing a lot of territory, and this is where we stand today.
There will be many watching in the US who will be amazed, appalled, that you could, as a NATO country, describe those responsible for October 7th as, in those terms.
If you look at the October 7th incidents and what happened there, we can see the reasons that prepared the conditions for October the 7th to occur. I would like to ask you how many Palestinians were killed. And let's look at the backdrop of all the incidents that have occurred, and then you will see a much different picture.
Keir, back with us now. Keir, I have to ask you, what does he say about Israel then?
Yeah, he is... He's very forthright about Israel. I mean, he describes Prime Minister Netanyahu. He talks about him, he relates him to the Nazis. I mean, people are going to find that very, very offensive in Israel and around the world, obviously, and here in the US. And I say that to him, but that is the way he says that he supports Israel, but he talks in those terms. And again, this is a country that is a NATO ally, a US ally, and strategically very, very important to the US.
You know, we keep talking about NATO here, and we have the big speech from Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, tomorrow at the United Nations. And again, Turkey is a part of NATO. Here's what he said when you asked him about NATO and Ukraine.
President Zelensky's administration has said that part of his peace plan would be Ukraine joining NATO. Would you welcome Ukraine as a member of NATO in principle?
The
US, first and foremost, doesn't want to see Ukraine as a NATO member. And many NATO countries don't want Ukraine to be a member state. So we need to see these facts for what they are, and we need to make our minds accordingly. Looking at these facts for what they are, these are not questions to be rushed. And when making our minds, when we are taking our decisions, we always take into consideration the stance of other NATO member states. We discuss those possible questions around the table and make the final decision accordingly.
But you have a veto. In principle, would Turkey accept Ukraine in NATO?
Yani şu an itibariyle
As of now,
NATO ülkelerinin
all
duruşu
the NATO member
benim
states
için diğer ülkeler
positions
için nedir ne değildir
will be important for me and for all the other countries. We are going to follow the developments, the deliberations, and reach a final decision accordingly. These are not decisions to be rushed in an excited way.
So you haven't decided, you haven't made your mind up?
Hayır.
No, no.
So, Keir, he said the quiet part out loud, right? Other NATO nations feel the same way. They don't want Ukraine to be part of the alliance just yet. Yeah. But it sounded like there was no near future for Ukraine to be in the alliance either.
Yeah, I mean, remember that Turkey slow-walked Finland and Sweden joining NATO, so he has a track record when it comes to this of being sceptical. He's right. There are big questions about Ukraine joining NATO because it's in a war right now with Russia, and that being in NATO would compel other countries to join that war. So there are real issues, but it is fascinating to hear him talk like that when President Zelensky is about, as we understand it, to talk about joining NATO as a crucial part of managing to achieve peace.
We're about 40 days out of our election here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Did you ask him about if there's a candidate that he favors? He's obviously been in power in Turkey for decades.
Yeah, I mean, he's not very diplomatic. He was diplomatic about that. I will tell you that he phoned President Trump after the first attempted assassination and gave him his best wishes.
They have a relationship.
They do.
Yeah.
They were both presidents at the same time. President Trump describes him as a friend. He says he doesn't know Kamala Harris so well, but is positive about the possibility of her becoming president. But look, here's the real point here. Whoever becomes president next year is going to have to deal with a world with countries like Turkey sitting on a fault line between Russia, China, the US and the West. He says next month to President Erdoğan, he will go to Russia, to the BRICS conference, and he talks very warmly about President Putin.
Okay, well, that's interesting as well. Okay, Keir Simmons, always bringing us incredible stuff. Great interview there, a lot of news.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.